Generals, here's the latest global situation update from the early hours of October 25th. First piece of intel, Trump really did announce that he got some money. Right now, the US military is so broke it's practically living off food stamps and loans. But surprisingly, a mysterious rich person donated $130 million. At first, that sounds like a lot. But with 1,320,000 active duty troops, that works out to just about $100 per person. And with America's soaring prices, $100 isn't even enough for a single family trip to the supermarket, let alone helping soldiers who still have mortgages and car loans to pay. Just paying military salaries costs the Pentagon $19.6 billion every month. So $130 million doesn't even make a dent. At best, it's just Trump's way of putting on a political show to stay in the spotlight. Right now, it's not just the military struggling, even federal employees are lining up for food aid and facing possible layoffs. That $130 million barely makes a splash. Honestly, Trump didn't exactly break his promise. But let's be real. The only question that matters is, did you actually get paid? Second piece of intel. Trump completely lost his temper late at night and suddenly announced that he was ending trade talks with Canada. The reason is almost funny. A Canadian commercial hit a nerve. The ad used a clip from Ronald Reagan's 1987 speech, where Reagan said that tariffs might benefit politicians in the short term, but would harm all Americans in the long run. Isn't that basically a direct slap at Trump's tariff policy? But here's the thing, that ad wasn't even from the federal government. It was a campaign ad from Ontario province. The Ontario premier had previously said that if Trump raised tariffs, Ontario would hit back with the same. It was just a local issue, but Trump blew up over it. Why was he so sensitive? Because the US Supreme Court is about to hold a hearing on tariffs, which will decide whether his tariff policy can be extended. And now Canada goes and uses his idol Reagan in an ad that looks like a public rebuke. No wonder he exploded. That said, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney used to criticize Trump all the time before taking office. But once he became Prime Minister, he quickly cozied up to him. So even though the talks have broken down for now, give it a few days, and they'll probably be back at the table again. Third piece of intel, Hamas just released all the Israeli hostages. And as expected, Israel immediately tore up the agreement right after. The Israeli parliament passed a bill by a razor-thin vote of 25 to 24 to annex the settlements in the West Bank. That move instantly stirred up a hornet's nest. Trump blew up right away, warning Israel that if they dared go through with the annexation, he'd withdraw all US support. He even said, "I promised the Arab nations this wouldn't happen." Vice President J.D. Vance was even angrier, calling it a mindlessly stupid political stunt, adding, "I personally feel insulted." Just a few days ago, he'd been trying to persuade Arab countries to pressure Hamas into a ceasefire, and now Israel turns around and slaps him in the face. In response, 15 countries, including Egypt, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia, jointly issued a statement condemning Israel for unilaterally breaking the deal and stirring up trouble. Meanwhile, the United Kingdom, France, and Germany were left completely embarrassed. They'd been working hard to promote Middle East peace, and Israel just threw the entire situation into chaos. Fourth piece of intel, the Brazilian soybean traders really shot themselves in the foot. China had shifted all its soybean orders from the United States to Brazil, helping Brazilian farmers out of a tough spot. From January to September this year, China imported 52.1 million tons of soybeans from Brazil, 66% of its total imports. At one point, a whopping 93% of all soybeans China bought came from Brazil. But then the Brazilian traders got cocky. They jacked up the price from $580 per ton to $650 per ton, making it $66 more expensive than American soybeans. That price hike hit Chinese oil mills hard. They were losing about 200 yuan per ton, and nearly 100 mills decided to suspend purchases altogether. As a result, Between December and January, about 8 million tons of Brazilian soybean orders were cancelled overnight. Before Brazil even realized what happened, China had turned to Argentina, buying 1.3 million tons, and also tapped Russia and Uruguay to fill the gap. Meanwhile, China Grain Reserve Sinograin began auctioning off its 45 million tons of stored soybeans to stabilize supply. Now, Brazil's stuck with mountains of soybeans piling up at its ports, costing them over $2 million a day just in storage fees. Short-sighted and greedy, a classic example of losing the long game for quick profit. Fifth piece of intel: the Russian military has bombed Ukraine into a state of shock, devastating the power infrastructure across eastern Ukraine. Key facilities like the Kryvyi hydropower plant and Kyiv thermal power plant No. 5 were hit hard. As a result, 60% of Ukraine's natural gas supply has been cut off, and most regions now have only about 4 hours of electricity per day. With winter approaching, this situation is dire. At this rate, Ukrainians will basically have to rely on shivering to stay warm. The Russian army has adopted a new artillery plow and drone strike tactic, heavy shelling to clear areas, followed by precision drone eliminations. The Ukrainian forces simply can't withstand it, and the fall of Krasnoyarsk, their last major stronghold, seems only a matter of time. In this desperate situation, President Volodymyr Zelensky has begun shifting blame. During a press conference in Brussels, he claimed that Ukraine and China have had no ongoing dialogue, and accused China of aiding Russia, saying that it is precisely this support that allows Russia to continue the war. Clearly, Zelensky is trying to pin Ukraine's military failures on China instead of facing the internal problems and battlefield realities. Sixth piece of intel: a bizarre blunder in Germany involving the military and police. About 500 German soldiers were conducting an anti-terrorism drill, disguising themselves as masked terrorists and roaming the streets. The problem: they didn't notify local residents or the police about the exercise. When people saw a group of armed, masked men wandering around, they thought it was a real terrorist attack and immediately called the police. Armed police rushed to the scene, but the soldiers, thinking the arriving officers were part of the drill, fired blank rounds at them. The police, unaware it was an exercise, believed they were under attack by real terrorists and returned fire for real. In the chaos, one German soldier was injured and taken to the hospital, while the police suffered no casualties. Honestly, the whole thing feels straight out of a dark comedy. The world just keeps getting more absurd.